Ano ai me ka vilina a ke aloha. Aloha kako. We want to welcome you here to our Eva Parker Woods cottage, which is situated among the ancient royal fish ponds of Kamehameha and Mo'i, kings in Ali'i before his time. A place called Kalahuipo'a, which is situated in South Kohala. This is a place, and here on this staging area, on this lanai of the cottage, over the past 23, almost 24 years, we've been doing an event called Twilight at Kalahuipo'a, which is a time of talk story, of sharing not only stories, music, hula, um, a special time where we would gather each month on the Saturdays closest to the full moon. And so blessed to have many of our kupuna, of our respected elders, great entertainers, hula masters, even our Paniolo Hawaiian cowboys who shared this time over the years, many who have now passed. And so we are so happy that we can continue in this way, more in a virtual manner. We since this COVID pandemic, we've not been able to hold our big gatherings, our Twilight at Kalahuipo'a, which was open not only to our hotel guests but to the community at large. And we are just waiting for a time that we can do it in a safe manner and that we can all gather together. So, as our kupuna would always teach us, ho'omanawa nui, we'll just wait patiently for the wakupono for the when the time is right to continue or to bring back our Twilight at Kalahuipo'a programs and to invite everybody to join us as we have over the many years past. This month of July is a very special month for us here at Mauna Lani. On 4th of July, we celebrated as Turtle Independence Day, and Pi'i La'eha, who is our turtle keeper, and he's also a historian as well, and he's been working with this program for many years, and we are so happy that this program has been so successful, and it's a wonderful program, an educational program where our guests and our visiting schools can learn about green turtles, or what we call honu, and we do this program in conjunction with National Marine Fisheries Service, as well as the Sea Life Park, who provides us with these juvenile turtles throughout the year, of which we release on 4th of July, which we call Turtle Independence Day. So many great things that happened through this month of July. But we want to, as we start this evening, my wife Anne and I will like to greet you with an oli that we learned many years ago. In fact, at Kamehameha schools, the schools that I attended, and that our special guest has attended as well. Um, this is the first oli, the first chant that we were taught, and it's a welcome chant called an oli aloha. Mm.
Kuilin? I really know.
We will now do this chant and then offer this special makana, this special lei, mailele of aloha. O
Unai tahala me talehua e halalehua no ia nakano e o ka uno ia e ano i nei e ani nei hoi o Tahiti mai ai ti mai no oko ai ti puno me ke aloha aloha e aloha e aloha e
Anna's offering this special lei maile, this maile lei, to our special guest for this evening, Uncle Fred Cachola, who has kindly consented to join us this evening for this talk story and to share a bit about his life growing up in Kohala, as well as the life of another great Kohala boy, right? A Keakaokalani o Kohala nei Kamehameha. So, Uncle Fred, mahalo for coming and joining us here at the Eva Parker Woods cottage. And I know over the past years, you have joined us at Twilight as well, you know, and shared with us intriguing stories, the birth and the life of Kamehameha. But before we get into that, I thought perhaps maybe we could share a bit about your life in growing up in Kohala.
Well, thank you very much, Danny and Anna. It's really a privilege and honor for me to be back here at this famous Kaluipua'a. And I really thank you and Maunalani Hotel for maintaining the traditions of Hawaiians telling their stories and telling it in their own way.
Yes.
I'm glad, there's no script. There's nothing to read here.
Aye.
And it's just Hawaiians telling their stories.
Yes.
And because I'm a Kamehameha of this Moku, the stories of Kohala are very, very important. And I keep gazing across the hotel grounds and I look at the beautiful slopes of the Kohala Mountains. And I just realized that the first 8 years of my life was only on the other side of that mountain. There was no reason for us to leave Kohala. So I never saw Waimea. I never came over the mountains at 22 miles away from Kohala because there was no reason to do so. And my universe for the first 8 years of my life was Kohala. So I was very fortunate to grow up with a diversity of boys and girls and kupuna and revered kupuna that later on in my life told me some stories that I never written in any books. And the stories that we're going to concentrate on is, of course, the Moku of Kohara.
Yes.
And we are right in the southern part of that Moku. It's right here, on the northern part of the Big Island. And we're going to talk not only about this famous Moku of Kohala, but indeed the most famous Hawaiian who ever lived. And that would be Kamehameha the Great, as shown here by Kamehameha artist Marilyn Kalevai, showing Kamehameha as he might have looked at his prime, not like the pictures we see of Kamehameha drawn by Corris and other Western artists who saw him when he was an aging kupuna, the last few years of his life. But this shows the Kamehameha that I like to envision when I tell these stories. And of course, you know, there's only one place that can talk about the birth of Kamehameha, and that's Kohala, guys. And so that's a little bit about my background and growing up in Kohala and being privileged enough to learn some more little of Kohala. Actually, it didn't really began for me until 1962. You know, when I was working on my master's degrees at the University of Hawaii, and I wanted to do a paper on history and philosophy of education because my master's degree was on the history and philosophy of education. So I chose to do a paper for Reverend Elias Bond, one of the most famous missionaries who devoted almost 60 years of his life only to Kohala. And I said, why not? Why not do a story of Elias Bond and of the 14 schools that he established, you know, all the way from Kauai all the way to Waipiu almost. 14 schools. I said, what a marvelous story that would be. So I decided to come home and interview the old-timers. And every time I interviewed the old-timers who knew about Elias Bond, invariably, the stories they would end up telling me was not about Father Bond. It was about Kamehameha. And it was intriguing stories because I had never heard them.
Who are some of these kupuna?
Yes, who were some of these kupunas? Well, the most revered kupuna that I had a chance to talk to was Heloke Mo'okini.
Yes.
And we're all familiar, at least most of us are familiar with that very famous Heiau Mo'okini.
Yes.
Heiau. And his family had the kuleana of maintaining that whole area of Kokoiki and Karame'e and Umiwai Bay and Kapakai and Kokoiki, because so much of it had remnants, had places, had objects that were very important in identifying themselves as Kohala people. It was part of their aina, but it was part of them. And knowing the stories and telling the stories from Heloke Mo'okini was very important. And his family is still doing it today. And so he told me some parts of the story that I'm going to share to you. And then later on, some other kupuna that I met, like Keoki Penehaka, about several years later, who was a kohuna from the Aupa of La'aumama in Kohala. And he began telling me more of that same story of Kamehameha and the birth of Kamehameha, which is what I'm going to focus on. The birth of Kamehameha and the place names of Kohala that are still there associated with his birth. You know, growing up in Kohala, many of us did not know the place names. Well, we knew the names, but we had no idea what they meant. We did not know the story behind those names. And when I talked to this kupuna like Keoki Penehaka, Heloke Mo'okini, Sam Hook, Kindi Sproat, his father, Bill Sproat, Akone Pule. You know, the highway from Kauai to Pololu is named Akone Pule. Yes. Well, I knew he and his family, and he began to tell me some of those stories. And then there were others in the camps at Halaula, like Yula and Mamo and Molali family. And they kept telling us stories about these places.
Born and raised in Halaula?
That's where I was born and raised, in Halaula. So in 1962, I began looking closely at what these guys were saying, what these kupuna were saying to me, and I realized then that, wow, I haven't heard any of these stories before. They were all brand new to me, and I was born and raised in Kohala. And I knew nothing about these stories, but this kupuna did. And I said, what a blessing. In fact, Heloke Mo'okini, you know, when I interviewed him, I'll never forget that afternoon at his house in Hawai'i. And I couldn't believe some of the things he was telling me, and I began asking him a lot of questions about Kamehameha, about the birth of Kamehameha. And he looked at me right in my eyes with a look that I never had before from anybody. He looked at me straight in my eyes, Danny, and he said, "You come tomorrow, bring your camera, and I will tell you the story. I will tell you the story." You know, I didn't realize what a blessed moment that was. Because the stories he told me, I had never heard. It's not written anywhere. And it was only remembered by Hiloke from what he was told by his ancestors. Mm-hmm. And so, in his own way, he was telling me his story in his way about the birth of Kamehameha. And when he told me, "Come with me, I want to take you to the places and I want to tell you the story," I said, "Whoa."
Oh, what an opportunity.
Wow. What an opportunity.
Did you get to record it or document that?
You know, I didn't have a tape recorder. I just had my camera. But I can tell you this, Danny. After every session I had with him, I was at home writing as mad as I could from memory.
Yeah.
And some of the most precious notes, historical notes I have, are my notes of my interviews with Hiloke Mokini. My notes in my interviews with Sam Hook, with Keoki Peneaka.
Oh.
Those notes are like gold to me. Because, you know, that's where I got my stories. Well, you know, when we talk about Kamehameha, you got to understand that as ancient Kupuna did, they knew the genealogy. Mm-hmm. And then this chart here, which was summarized by my daughter, shows Kamehameha. Here he is. And there are his Po'olua fathers. One is Kahikili, and the other is Keoa. Po'olua. Now, Po'olua means two heads, right? So, one of these got to be his biological father. Mm-hmm. But two of them also claim to be his father, and he probably looked at both of them as his father. Mm. But this is very important, Dana, because there are many versions of Kamehameha's birth, but the one I'm going to share is two versions given to me by Hiloke. Mm-hmm. And let's take that version which most historians know and talk about and write about. And that is that his father was Keoa. And Keoa was one of the high-ranking chiefs in the court of Alapai Nui. Mm-hmm. So we do know that Kamehameha was born during the reign of Alapai Nui. Yes. And that is how our kupuna used to kind of keep track chronologically. Oh, in the time of Liloa. Oh, in the time of Manokalani Po. Oh, in the time of Alapai Nui. Mm. And they knew these chiefs, and they knew about when they were talking about. So you have to understand that Keoa was considered one of his fathers. In that case, the king on Maui at that time was Kuakini. Mm. And Kuakini raided he came all the way down to here, all the way to Poako. He demolished he cut the coconut trees. He did a raiding party all the way from Kohala to Poako, while Keoa and Alapai Nui and his court were in Kona. Mm. Okay. And part of that court was Kamehameha's mother. We all agree the mother was a royal princess from Kona and Kohala background, and her name was Kekuapuiwa. And if you look at this chart, it has these brown lines. All the brown lines are her ancestors, and they're all Kohala chiefs. If you look at the green lines, they're all related to high chiefs of the Big Island, Moku of Kohara, all the way up to Umialiloa and beyond. So we have the lineage of Kamehameha through the chiefs of Kohala and the chiefs of Moku of Kohara. If you think about Keoa as his father now, when Luakini invaded this site and the word got to Alapainui, he said, well, we can't let him get away with this. So we got to go pay him back. So he gathered his royal court and went up to Upolu Point at the Kaupo of Koko'ike to get his army ready to invade and do a revenge raid on Kuakini. See?
It's Kuakini or Kahikili?
Kuakini.
Kuakini.
At that time, it was Kuakini.
Ah.
Kahikili came after him.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
Okay, and we're going to talk about Kahikili. but while they were waiting at Koko'ike, and they were worshiping at Mo'okini and waiting, this was during the cold season, rainy season, rough waters, thunder, lightning, all those beautiful signs for Ali being born, right? Thunder, lightning, heavy storms. Yeah, all the Hawai'i, all these royal symbols. And sure enough, Kamehameha was born at that site. If you think about Keoa as a father. Okay. Now, the thing before the birth, a very significant thing happened with the mother. And according to Hiloke and all the other kupuna, they all said the same thing to me. She had this unique craving for the eyeball of a tiger shark.
The Niuhi.
Of a tiger shark. And all the kahuna said, wow, never saw this before. What does this mean? What does it mean? They all got together and they concluded, a tiger shark is the Ali'inui of the moana, of the ocean. He's the high chief, the tiger shark. And if the mother wants to eat his eyeball, you're going to have to kill that shark. Take out his eyeball and eat him. You're killing the high chief of the ocean to devour his eyeballs. They conclude, Danny, this keiki, this baby, is going to be a slayer of chiefs. A slayer of chiefs. Already the signs and the symbols and everything is there. And for them, you know, two important things happened when they made that announcement. Okay. On one side of the story, that the Kohala people, when they heard, we're going to have the greatest warrior, the highest chief, the killer of chiefs, they rejoiced. They said, yes, yes, at last. Because for 6 generations, Moku of Kohara was at civil war.
This island of
There were
Hawaii.
always 3 or 4 chiefs fighting among each other. There was not one ruler like Umialiloa or Kaku'ihewa or Manokalani. There was no chief like that. There were always this civil war going on. And the unique part about that civil war was every civil war involved a high chief from Kohala, always trying to become the Ali'inui, but not making it. But not making it. So if you talk about one generation is 25 to 30 years. 6 generations is almost 100 years. Can you imagine this island for 100 years was under constant civil war. And every time there's a battles are going on, there's a Kohala chief trying, but not being able to do it. So when they hear this, the greatest slayer of chiefs, naturally they're saying, yes, at last, at last, at last we're going to have a high chief that can do it. All these other chiefs could not, but this one can. So the Kohala people were jubilant. They rejoiced. And they said to the trusted kahu, Naiole, who Keakaokalani chose. Kahu, the guardian, the custodian, the caretaker of the child, was a very coveted role. And this was taking care of a child not 2 times a week or just on weekends. This was for life. You were in charge of not only the physical, but the spiritual, the physical, all the protocol. You were his caregiver. You were his tutor, you were his mentor, you were his coach, you were everything to that baby.
So how did they come to select Naiole?
Because Naiole was the best iwi kuomo for Keakaokalani's family. Iwi kuomo is a high chiefly status that provides for the general welfare of the family. Make sure they got kapa, they got clothing, their lands are taken care of, they get food. He's their steward. And he was so trusted that Keakaokalani said, that's the guy. So the Kohala people looked at Naiole and said, brother, you got to take care of this baby. Okay, so that's one thing. The other side of the reaction when people say the slayer of chiefs was just the opposite. The other chiefs like Alapai Nui and Keawe Mauhili and the other Kau chiefs and Hilo chiefs began whispering. They began whispering in Alapai Nui's ear. I think you should nip the vauke in the bud before it gets to be big like a tree in a branch. Famous saying.
Yes.
Nip the vauke in the bud. Another poetic way of saying, you got to kill this baby. Nip the vauke in the bud. And Alapai Nui, the more I studied this, then he was a mo'i, but a tenuous position. And these chiefs that were under him were already saying, brother, we're giving you advice. If you want to take care of yourself and your family and people like us, you better kill that baby. I don't think he really, because his family was part of Kamehameha's ancestors.
Yeah.
But in Alapai Nui's rise to power, he killed some of them. So he kind of said, I think to appease the Hilo and Kau chiefs, well, yeah, maybe we should do something with this baby. And so he gave the order to go look for the baby. But the Kohala people and Naiole were saying, you're not going to do that. You're not going to harm this baby because he's special. He's very, very special. I think that might be mine. May I have a drink of that, please? Yeah. And so 2 reactions. Fear from the high-ranking chiefs that this baby is going to kill them or their descendants. Rejoicement and jubilation among the Kohala people who are saying, we finally got the person who's going to be the king, the greatest warrior ever. And we're going to make sure nothing happens to him. And so now I always says to all these Kohala people, by the way, if that's the case, you guys got to help me. When Alapai Nui comes, you got to confuse him, you got to talk riddles, you got to show him the wrong direction, Kealaheva, the wrong way. right?
Yes.
You gotta
Threw them off.
use and there's a place in Kohala called Ka'ahe. Throw them off, confuse them. Oh, they went that way. No, I think they went that way. Oh, they went Ka'ahe, confusing, riddles. And so they were well prepared for doing that. Okay, now that's Keua's version of being born. Okay? And the other story, and this one is really interesting, is the one that Heloka said his real father was not Keua. It was Kahikili. And Kahikili is this blue line. And yes, it goes to Kuakini and some of the Maui chiefs. In fact, Kahikili did become Alapai Nui. He became Ali'i Nui of Maui, Kingdom of Maui. But his family are from the Big Island. Okay? So during Makahiki time, you know, they can visit. There's no war. All the spears and all the weapons, they moi, right? They go to sleep. All the cool gods, war gods, they go moi too. And people travel, it's a good time. It's peaceful time. And Kahikili comes over to visit his family on the Big Island. And he says, you know, this is a good time. And you folks are all relatives, all my relatives here. Why don't you come to Maui to visit? Come to Maui to visit. And by the way, bring that girl with you. Who's the girl? Kekuia Puiva. And bring that girl with you. And Mokiri looks at me and he says, Kamehameha was conceived on Maui. And his father was Kahikili. And the more I study the life of Kamehameha, the more I'm convinced, and so are many Hawaiian historians, Keua was not his father. Most of the non-Hawaiian historians think they say Keua was the father. But people like Heloke, Keoke Penehaka, Sam Hook, all those guys in Kohala, Aole, Kahikili, the father. But the same story happens. She's threatened, and her life is threatened, and her friends tell her on Maui, you know, I think you better get on a canoe and go home to Kohala because you're going to get hurt, and the baby's going to die, and everything, worst thing's going to happen to you. You better go home. She says, I think I will. Yes. So they get in a canoe, her and entourage, and they're in the channel, rock and rolling season, right? Ikua. That Alnuiha channel is rough.
Yes.
And here comes Mama in a canoe,
Hapai.
and the baby is born in the canoe.
Which is what I heard.
This is another version. See, this is, to me, this is, and you know, the Kohala Kupuna, that's what they believe. That Kahikili was his father. And that as a canoe was coming back to Halaba, where her mother, that was the Aina Pono'i. That was the family ancestral lands of Kekuapuiwa, which also became the ancestral lands for Kamehameha, is a Halaba. And on the way over, the baby was born, and a steersman said, "Oh no, we're not going to Halaba. We don't have time. Just hang on to baby. Little blood in there, koko ike, a little blood is in the canoe. That's okay. Hang on. They didn't cut the umbilical cord. The placenta is still there. So just hang on. We're going to move. We're going to go to Kapaka at Kokuike. It's closer." So the canoe lands over there. And that's when they take the canoe and Mama right up to shore. And Heloke then tells me, that's where they cut their umbilical cord. And he was showing me that place. He was standing right there. And I asked him then, I said, where was the hale? He said, the canoe landing was right, and he showed me this canoe landing called Kapa'akai. And it's the only place you can land a canoe at the Upolu, because the rest is very stony, rocky boulders. You cannot land a canoe, except for that small space. The canoe landed there, they brought it up here, and I said, where was he born? Where was he cleansed? And he pointed, I have a picture of Heloke looking around, getting his bearings, and he walked into this cane field, and he pointed to the ground, 2 hands. He said, the hale was right about here. And I took a picture of that. Then he took me a little distance away. He said, he went on these big boulders, and he said, the spring where they cleaned him is below these boulders. And I said, but he said, but these boulders came here because of the 1946 tsunami. It brought all the boulders up and covered that whole shoreline. But he said, listen carefully, and you will hear the gurgling. And I listened closely, and I could hear the gurgling of water. The spring was still there. And Heloke walked right, and he said, this is where they cleaned the baby. And he's standing there, and I'm taking a picture. And then he took me to a place where his umbilical cord was hid. I'm not going to share everything, but he showed me where the umbilical cord, because he knew it, and he wanted me to know. And then Mama's placenta had a hard time coming out, the airway. And so that's when he said, see those 2 stones right close by? He said that was her birthstones. Not to give birth, but to hold and help her get rid of the afterbirth. And he showed me the first stone. It was huge, rounded on the top. And he said this was where she grasped on the top, knelt, and pushed down. And that didn't work. So they used this other stone right next, which was big, flat, on the ground. She lay on her back, push it, and he showed me how it was done. Put her feet against the stone and pushed, and then the airway came up. So those birthstones, Heloke, made sure that the plantation never moved those stones. And there was an old road going in there in the cane field. And sure enough, there was a circular area where the 2 stones were undisturbed. It was surrounded by cane, but not cultivated. And there were the 2 stones. And Heloke made little signs. He said, Kamehameha birthstones. Or made wooden signs. And I have a picture of him right there. So my story goes, the baby was born. And now you know the difference between the 2 sides, Keo'o the father, or Kaikili, and the canoe version, right? But what happens after that is how the place names came to be. Because Naiole said to all the people in Kohala, I'm going to take a route, a secret route, and I'm not going to tell nobody. But I will only say to a few people, and you guys got to help me, okay? So he picked his route, and he picked the trusted people to help him get from place to place. And that's where the place names came in. Because at every place he stopped is now a place name of Kohala.
Yes.
One of the first places he stopped was at Pua Mauna Kea, where they looked back to see if they were being followed. And they were not, so they could take their time. So they went to the first village, and the first group of people were waiting a long time. And when they arrived, they said, Ho'ea, you have arrived at last. So that place is called Ho'ea. And you go to Kohala, right below Hawai'i, there's the sign, Ho'ea.
Yes.
The next place they went to, Aue, the wet nurse was not there. Something broke down. Some communication broke down. And Kamehameha was crying, he was hungry and he was crying. And so mamas who feed their babies know that sound. When a baby has that certain cry, the mamas will say, yes, baby's hungry. I know my baby's hungry. That's what they heard. They heard this sound coming from his breath. And in Hawaiian, that's ha, breath. And hunger, a breath of hunger, is V. Ha, V. So that's how V got its name, because of what happened there. The next place they went to, the men were already saying, the men that were with Naiole, they were spooked. They said, if we get caught, we're dead. All of us. And these warriors are on the way, they're going to catch us and we're all going to die. And they began to get very scared and panicky. And that's when Naiole said to them, as other kupuna said to us sometimes, my makau, don't be afraid. Makau is afraid. My means no, don't. My makau. Then he uses another term, Danny, that's so special. I've never seen this term used anywhere else. He says to them, Hono makau. And Honolulu, Honoipo, Honolulu. Hono is a Hawaiian prefix that describes calm, peaceful, Malay. Hono, Honolulu, Honolulu. And when he was saying Hono makau, he meant calm your fears. And this is what Heloke told me. He used the word Hono makau, kioke peneaka. He said to the men, calm your fears, don't panic, we're not going to get caught. So don't panic, right? And Kohala High School, if you look at the sign right at Kohala High School, what does the sign say? Hono makau. So when I was growing up in Kohala, we never called Kohala High. We always called it Hono makau School, because it was at Hono makau. And then the next place they went to is where the Kamehameha statue is today. Now I only got there and it was raining season. All the streams were flooded. And if you go between Hawai'i and Kapa'au, there are many streams. And each stream had to be weighted. And so they wrapped Kamehameha in his kapa. And the kapa went to these flooded streams. And the Hawaiians called Kamehameha's kapa went swimming. So that place is now called Kapa.
Oh, to swim, to float, yeah.
Swim, to float, to take a, yeah. And that's how Kapa got its name. And so we can go on and on. This, and you only got about 20 minutes left. So, but
well, I mean, I know you've shared this story before in past twilights, but I think this time, in explaining about, Kahikili being the biological father, what some of the kupuna of those Heloke Mo'okini and the others had shared with you at the time, and even pointed out where the birthstones were. This is an amazing revelation. I'd love to see those pictures one day.
Those pictures I have of Heloke are one of the most precious photographs I have, because, I really did not fully realize and appreciate what he was telling me. Because I don't know who else he told his story to. But my brother-in-law, who married my younger sister, his name is David Rocha. He's the grandson of Heloke.
Oh.
Heloke's daughter is David's mother. And David Rocha knew Heloke very well. That's his grandfather. And when I told him all the things that Heloke shared, he said, you know, I never heard of my grandfather saying that to anybody. You were very lucky. You were very blessed.
You were the chosen one.
You know, like I said, Danny, you know, that look that he gave me that afternoon at his house, I have never seen anybody look at me like that. He looked right into my soul. His eyes pierced right into my soul, and he looked at me straight on, and he said, you come tomorrow, I'll tell her the story, and bring your camera. Wow, I was blessed.
Yes.
I was blessed.
Yes.
And by the way, something else in his house. He was living alone in this small little just a little, about half the size of Eva Woods' cottage, a small little plantation house, all by himself. And when I got to his house, he brought me into the room, and I was stunned because I never seen this in any house. Along the walls of every wall were pohaku. Pohaku. And he kept saying, he said, I'd like you to meet my friends.
Oh.
I'd like you to meet my friends. And he began to say, oh, this one here. And he had a story for each pohaku.
Wow.
And then he says, oh, there's some more. Fred, he took me into the kitchen. And against all the wall, every wall, were these pohaku that he had been collecting.
All these stones. Yeah.
All these stones. And every stone meant something very significant to him, and he could tell me stories of each one. And why they're with him. And I asked my brother-in-law David, I said, David, what happened to those pohaku when Heloke passed away? He said, we made sure all that pohaku went with him.
Went with him. All of his friends.
Heloke knew things about Kohala that, you know, I don't think anybody else did. And I was very blessed that he shared some of that with me. And when I looked at the place names, Hoea, Hawi, Kapa'ao, Honomakao, and others like Halaula. What does that Halaula mean? What the Makapala has a significance. Ripe eyes, because the eyes of the soldiers were all bloodshot. They couldn't find them in the Hawaiians. And then everybody was making fun of them. Look at these soldiers. They're all bloodshot. Makapala pala. The eyes all ripe. See, they're getting close. And where he ended up, Avini, where do you see the term Avini? The closest I can come to describing the term is what the Jewish people call chutzpah, in your face. And there is Naiole and his warriors and the infant Kamehameha way up in Avini. To get there, you had to go through steep, dangerous trails up and down, Pololu and up, Honokari'iki and up, Honokanenui and up, Honokea and up. And the trails are only like 4 feet wide. And the cliffs are hundreds of feet. It's very difficult to get there and very easy to defend. That's why Naiol is up there. Okay, Alapainui, let's see what you got. Let's see what you got. Come on, give us your best shot, because we're here. Impudence in your face. Avini. Those terms, I don't see any place else. Why, Danny? Because they're very specific to this story. Very specific to the place. I never hear the word Honomako used anywhere else. I never see the word Hawi any place else. Or Kapa'ao. But when you put them all together, This was the way the Kohala people were so proud of what they did. They were so proud that they saved this famous warrior, and they commemorated what they did at each of these places and gave them place names. So when you go to Kohala now, David, you pass Hawai'i, you remember the story now. That's where the baby was starving.
Yes.
Oh, and you know what? Keoke Penehanka. So I asked Keoke, so what did he do? The baby is crying. He's starving. He's only a few days old. What did they do? He said, you know what they did? They pipe by the grass. They got edible insects. And they were edible insects. They took the soft part and they mashed it in their hands and they made a little gruel out of that and fed the baby to keep him alive. I said, really? He said, yes.
Yeah.
Keoke Peneaka said that. You know what they did for it? They pipe for insects. They had to feed that baby. And that's why that place is called Hawai'i. Now you know.
What an amazing story that is. And,
Yeah.
you know, we, of course, celebrated Kamehameha's life last month in June. You know, June 11th was the day that was selected, you know, and the first statue that was made for Kamehameha and was
Still up
lost
there.
at sea in the Falkland Islands and retrieved is now in Kapa'au.
Yes.
You know, and what an amazing story to tell. And here we are in Kohala.
Yes, this is
Now,
the
telling
Moku.
this story.
This whole Moku should be very proud.
Yeah.
And we are the home of Kamehameha. We're the only guys can say that.
Yeah.
There's no other Moku. No other Moku. And by the way, you know, when I do this lecture and I show my slides, I have this map of Kohala
The different place names.
and the different place names. And my daughter, Kehao, made a matrix with the name, place names, what it means in Hawaiian, how it's associated with the birth. And this was Kohala's Kupuna's way to perpetuate their story. So once you know the place names, you know the story. What a way to commemorate. You know, by the way, Danny, I looked at some references. When President Kennedy died, guess how many places in the United States was changed to Kennedy? 625 places.
Really? Wow.
625 places on a continent
Wow.
changed the name to Kennedy, Cape Kennedy.
Yes.
The airport in Kennedy Airport, the Kennedy High School, 625 places were used to commemorate that great man. Well, what the people in Kohala did was name place to remember what they did to save Kamehameha. It's their way to commemorate the people of Kohala and their beautiful conspiracy to save him. You know,
You know, and what's amazing too, you know, and in times past when we first would travel to Kohala, it was, you know, in trying to remember the names, it was difficult to remember the sequence sometimes of what area comes next. But once you know the story, it's so much easier to remember the names of the places in the order that which you would arrive one after the other. And thank you so much for that, for sharing.
You know, talking about stories, I want to tell a story of a song.
Yes.
And this song was written by two Kohala ladies, the Naipu sisters. And it's about an area just a few hundred yards away from where Kamehameha was born, at this place at Honoipo. It's a beautiful song. And it tells a story about their love for this place. It talks about the Pu'ukehoni. It talks about the land of Puakea. It talks about the bay, Honoipo. It talks about the cliff, Paleakamoa. It talks about the ship that used to come and anchor and the steel cables. I mean, if you listen to this song, these are two Kohala women who were really showing their love for that Aina. And maybe we should give it a shot, Danny. You want the words? You can hold it.
I can.
I got one here.
Okay.
Okay, the name of this song is Honoipo, Good People. And it's a good old Kohala song written by Kohala ladies. And it's also called Paleakamoa. And we can sing this song and show how these ladies felt about this place. Akaluna maua ao Kihoni. Two of us on the heights of Kihoni. Ikeia ikanani ao Puakea. The beauty of Puakea is seen. Kau aku kamana ono Honoipo. Our thoughts go to Honoipo. Me kanene mali chorus. Like Kaulana o Upolu ikamali. He ho ailana iana ke kaleponi o ke kukila kila mai o Paleakamoa kawea kila holu ika ilikai e aloha ia home ao Kamehameha. Kamehameha, the beloved home. Ia home o kipa me ke aloha. The home of hospitality and love. I laila mako e valea ai. There we relax. Mena hoa alo kainea. Chorus, like Kaulana. Like Kaulana o Upolu ikamali. Ke ho ailona iana ke kaleponi. O ke kukila kila mai o Paleakamoa. Kauea kila holu ika ilikai. Kauea kila holu ika ilikai. Good old Kohala song, written, composed by Kohala ladies about Kamehameha, Kihoni, Puakea, Paleakamoa. And it's another way of Hawaiian telling their stories through music and their love for the land.
Yes.
Good example.
Yeah.
And while we sing, we cannot ignore one of the most famous songs that came out.
Yes.
From Kohala. By the way, you know, this song, Paleakamoa, was really known only in Kohala. And the Naipu sisters sang it, you know, just for Kohala and their love for that place. It became very popular, Daddy, in the 1950s when Uncle Bill Lincoln from Kohala.
From Kohala, yes.
Yeah, Uncle Bill Lincoln took the song with him to Honolulu. Then he sang it, and then everybody, the whole world knew about Honoipo, Paleakamoa, and the music of Kohala.
You know, and there's a number of great entertainers, composers, arrangers that came out of Kohala, such as Uncle Benny Kalama.
Yes.
Who's from Kokoiki, the
Yes.
area where
Kamehameha was born.
in
Yes.
that area. Uncle Benny Kalama. Then we have Uncle Kindy Sproat,
Kindy Sproat from
storyteller,
Amazing
musician,
storyteller
singer.
and singer.
The
You know,
Lim family
The Lim
Yes,
family.
Auntie
from
Marianne.
Newly. Yeah.
John
And,
Keave.
John Keave from,
Yes.
he's my neighbor at
Yes.
Kauhu.
Yes.
You know, but these are all Kohala people who love that Aina so much. And they keep writing songs about that identity. And I think that really is so important too. Of course, we got to sing a couple of verses of.
Yes, we should sing that other song that Kohala is so.
You know,
No,
Kohala
no.
is a very windy place, and it's a very special place. And it has this famous wind that keeps blowing constantly. And a lot of people come to Kohala and they say, wow, I don't know how you guys can stand this wind, but we love it. And when it doesn't have the wind, then you know, whoa, how miserable it is. We're waiting for the wind to come back. And the name of that wind in Kohala is Apa Apa. Apa Apa, you know, the strong, steady wind. And the most famous song from Kohala is this one. Maikai kamakani o Kohala ike ia ika inuvai o kawai no ia pono kaua vai kaulana o kaina. This beautiful chorus. Ko aloha, kau mea nui. He makana na kapuwai. Chorus. Ko aloha, my love for you. Kau mea nui. This wind that comes. He makana na kapuwai. This wind that comes from our hearts and gives land and precious rain and water to Kohala. Very famous song. So, you know, then it's been wonderful. And as you said, we don't have time to continue. It's about an hour, but
Yes.
But you know, just telling the stories, I think, is important. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Uncle Fred, for being here as our guest on this virtual talk story and for sharing the stories of about your life and the life of King Kamehameha the Great.
Yeah.
As you said, the greatest and most well-known Hawaiian. Yeah.
And a koala boy.
And a kohala boy.
Kohala boy.
And a koala Kamahana. In fact, there's so many places in Kohala that are still there that Kamehameha built later on. The road that we all use today to go from the cliffs down to Kapanaya Bay, that's his road. And we're still using it. The road that the fishermen used to go down the cliffs to go get their fish at Kohala Point, that's Kamehameha's road. You know, Danny, we can walk the same grounds that he walked on without going on concrete, without going in somebody's security pastures and gates. We can still walk his footsteps. And I hope we can always do that in Kohala.
Yes.
And there's a group of us trying very hard to maintain that vahikupuna.
Preserve these sites. These
The
vahipana.
birthstones. The vahipana. And, you know, when we dedicated the birthstones, and that's another long story, and made it part of the historical park for Lapakahi. I was there when we dedicated those stones. And I cried because I could look up and say to Heloke, it is not just your kuleana now. It is a kuleana for the state of Hawaii to take care of this vahikupuna. Your pohaku that you work so long to protect is never going to be destroyed. It's never going to be moved, just like you wanted it. And it brought tears when I realized, all the years that Iloke took to maintain the pohaku and to remember the stories. And again, I was very, very, very privileged that he shared them with me.
And we're so glad that you were there for him to share with this knowledge, and that you share with so many others, and we're the privileged ones to be here
And
to
now
listen
you're
to the
here to
stories.
share it with us. Mahalo anui loa.
Yes.
If you didn't know the birth of Kamehameha, now you know.
Yes.
If you're thinking about who his father was, now you know. If you're wondering
Version
about
1 and
all
2.
those names in Kohala, Hawai'i, Makapala, now you know.
Yes.
And we got to keep telling these stories, Danny, so you got to keep it going. You got to
And now
keep this
everybody out there in viewing this
going. Yeah.
will know as well. So thank you very much for sharing that. And
Aloha.
we'd love to spend time with you up north and maybe
certainly welcome.
visit these areas.
Walk these places.
Yes.
We ought to go back and take a look at those places.
We need to do that. So, as we say, mahalo nui loa ya oi, Uncle Fred Keakaokalani, and for being here, for sharing your knowledge, sharing your mo'olelo, your stories. And we want to also thank the Maunalani Auberge Resort Hotel, for continuing these Twilight Talk Story evenings virtually until we can get our Twilight programs back on the Saturdays closest to the full moon. And then we also want to thank Friends of the Future, nonprofit, who has supported us all these years on our Twilight programs. And
yes, and the many people that come to help make this all happen, from setting everything up.
Well, thank you, Danny. You've done this for 23 years. My goodness. I do hope you have some of this recorded someplace.
Yes.
Because you got some pretty good stuff.
We have.
You had some pretty good people telling pretty good stories, and I hope they will never be forgotten, and you'll continue to malama those stories.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, mahalo, Susan and Keone.
Thanks to the camera guys out there standing in the hot sun.
Mahalo Anui, coming all the way from Puna.
Yes.
To help us with this.
To help
videotaping.
Capture this moment, to video this time at sunset.
And PE.
Who comes to set up as well.
Yes, and Sophie and Bob.
Sophie and Bob, and others behind the scene that never.
The Ruddles are always Malam and Kokua are access into this area.
Yeah, it's good to see Francis and all these old timers down there. Yeah. Good.
So shall we just close this with our usual closing song, Hawai'i Aloha?
Yes.
E Hawai'i e kune
hanawe. And to all of you out there, please sing along with us.
Kuhome kulai Oli no wawina pono lanio E Hawai'i Aloha E haoli na opi o Hawai'i nei Oli mai na ahe makani e pa mai nei Mau ke aloha no Hawai'i E haoli na opi o Hawai'i nei Oli mai na ahe makani E pa mai nei Mau ke aloha no Hawai'i
ke aloha no Hawai'i.
Aloha no.
We want to say aloha to all of you out there. Also, birthday wishes to all those in June. My mom, who just made 95 in
Oh my gosh,
June,
your
and
brother Alan.
PE and Mele, and
And
all
some of our mo'opuna
Yes.
as well, our twin
our family
granddaughters,
members.
Juneteenth.
Haoli lahanau
And
to
newest-
all of you,
Yes.
as well as those
my
in
youngest
in
daughter's
July.
birthday is today, Lenani.
Today.
Today.
Oh gosh! Well, happy birthday
Happy
to Lane
birthday,
Nani.
Lane
Happy
Nani.
birthday.
Happy birthday. Just 3 weeks ago, our youngest mo'opuna was born.
Yes.
Vivehi.
Really?
Vivehi aloha.
Ah.
Hi.
So we want to say mahalo to all of you for joining us here at Kalahui Pua on the porch of the Eva Parker Woods cottage. And we look forward to seeing you all again next month in August.
Ai.
From all of us to all of you, a hui ho kako, malama pono ke kino, as my grandfather would always say, take care of yourselves, be safe, and be happy. Aloha.